Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you here this evening. My name is Tony Morris, and I'm chair of the board for another 8 months or so, and loving it. We are rolling down to the end of our silver anniversary year, and the TED Talks were part of our celebration of our 25th anniversary. How many of you were here for any of the spring TED Talks, either here or hope you enjoyed them? I'm sure that's why you're back. They went so well, and Karen and I think we might, as the organization might, make them a permanent thing from time to time because they went so well. And we hope you enjoy this evening and find it stimulating. And you are the future of philanthropy. So before we get started, and I won't take a lot of your time, we're going to have a brief look back at our history, the Chester County Community Foundation, and then we'll move into the You Are the Future of Philanthropy. So thanks very much for being here, and I hope you enjoyed the program.
All right, they just told me I don't have to stand back here. I can walk around.
Uh-oh.
All right, that actually is better. The one thing we did find is that the TED Talks are a lot more interesting when they're a conversation with everybody, and it helps to get really close, all right? So when you all want to talk, if I want to hear it, we'll put the mic in your face too. How's that? So what I'd like to do is give you a bit of a sense of why we were really overjoyed when each of the panelists said, yeah, I guess I'll go up and help you with that TED Talk, because there's different reasons that we have you on this stage to help us with this conversation. Stephanie has joined us, Stephanie Pahides Kalogris, Esquire, from Land Macro Lane. Stephanie is one of the, except for Tony Morris, Esquire here, consummate estate planning attorneys in the room. How's that? Does that help? Okay, on the East Coast. And I think Stephanie sees a lot of individuals who may or have philanthropic intent, and also a lot who don't. But anytime you do estate planning, charity, the question about charities and philanthropy comes into the picture. And you've been doing this for a long while, and I bet you've seen some changes over time. So that was one really wonderful reason to have you on stage.
Thank you.
Eric Goodmanson from Pegasus. Eric, you're not the normal IT kind of guy. As I started to get to know you better, you do an amazing amount of community service work. And it just is stunning to me to see somebody really, I don't know if you did more when you were a child or maybe blossomed through college or, I mean, yes. So something has set off in you about the philanthropy, which there's a really great story there of what got you involved in community service work of all kinds. So there's a story there. Now, Kathy Willichek, CPA, over the years Kathy, does CPAs really like public speaking?
No.
So you can see that you're doing a really big thing here. But what strikes me with Kathy is that a few things. One, again, so much community volunteer service throughout a long career in accounting. And also to see how you've been able to sort of be a boundary spanner. You get young people involved in community service, charities, and philanthropy. You get old folks involved and everybody in between. So there's something going, how you see philanthropy and what it does for you and how you help the community by putting people in places to help philanthropy grow. And Scott, I just like Sugartown Smoke Specialties. That's all there is to it. Scott Hattersley actually served on our board of directors in that beginning part when Dave Freese had a lot of parties, as I remember. And it's interesting because, again, so much community service from a different vantage point, I think. I think that there's a lot that goes on in the family with you and what you bring to the table on that and how you see philanthropy past, present, and future, and how you imbue it within your own family and what you've seen and what you're trying to help grow in your own kids.
Absolutely.
So when you've got some real interesting panelists up here, and I know that you are all involved in different parts of philanthropy as well in charity work. So interesting conversation. So that's why I asked you to come. So when we look at Katherine Fulton's classic video now about the future of philanthropy, she brings up those 5 trends. And what I'd like to ask is, and this is one of those things where the ground rules are, if you want to answer the question, you do, and whoever goes first goes first. So we're not going to go down the line and picking it off in order, all right? And since you're all separately mic'd, right?
Yes.
Yes.
You can talk over each other, all right? So have a conversation. I mean, you've been doing all kinds of things for quite a while. What sorts of changes have you seen when you first got involved in community service work and volunteer work? It's not community service. I mean, were there things as you served on boards of directors early on that you saw that do and don't work now? Have you seen changes over time in the charities that you've been involved with and in the people who really make charities happen?
I'll answer it first if
Thanks,
you don't
Eric.
mind. Yeah, I'll jump in. It seems like things happen faster, and I think that's symptomatic of the digitization of everything. You know, so much is done over the internet now, and not just exchange of information, but also rapidly sharing ideas, rapidly sharing events, rapidly sharing needs. For example, Kennett Area Community Service that Kennett Food covered had a large need after they had a fire not too long ago. I'm sure many people in the room are familiar with that. And the first I heard of it was actually from one of their vendors who was working to clean it up. And they were doing some charitable work, and they actually posted online, hey, food cupboard is damaged, it needs help, you know, here's what's going on, here's what we're doing there. And it was a very low-key sort of self-promoting advertisement, I suppose, in that regard, but that wasn't their intention. And the reality was there was a huge outpouring of community activity, you know, so much so that I'm hearing they have, you know, more resources now than they even know what to do with, which is a great problem to have. And I saw, for example, this afternoon the local Chamber of Commerce, Southern Chester County Chamber of Commerce, is actually coordinating volunteers of young people to go in and help sort all the donations that have come in.
So the technology can work to our benefit because the word gets out faster and spreads more, right? Talk about the pros and cons of, I would be concerned as an old person who's been in philanthropy and charities for, 40 years or something like that. A lot of times decisions take time, and speed can cause some kind of shoddy decisions to get made. Everybody wants things right away. So what's the pros and cons of speed and the word getting out there? Does it work to your benefit if you're on a board of directors? Does everybody work at the same pace? Can people keep up? What are you seeing?
I think it creates challenges for boards because they work in different ways. Board terms tend to be a number of years, so as boards age out, and if they don't take care to make sure that their board's rotating, that there's new people, there gets to be a fixation or a stubbornness about how we do things. I speak with a lot of boards in my auditing duties, and the successful boards have mandatory rotations. They take care in their governance to select board members who may not have all the experience that a real tried and true board member will have, but they bring them in, they let them express their different ideas, they come to agreements over periods of time, and when those other board members age off, these younger, more attuned to what's happening in today's giving are ready to take their place. And boards who don't do that suffer greatly in these times. You can't let your board age out to the point where that it's not sustainable.
All right, so
or to stagnate, and
right.
I would absolutely agree with that, and that's why it's important also to, look at the four of us up here. We're a pretty diversified group, and I think that's very important when you're talking about a board as well. You bring in those new people, and if they are youngers, sort of chiming on to what Eric said, you know, the millennials are go, go, go. Let's get this done. Karen, you asked, you know, is there a problem with that? Not as long as everything's somehow kept in check. But at least you're getting different ideas, you're getting different energies. I think that can only benefit the organization as a whole, or help to obtain that goal.
So when I look at Chester County, a lot of times when we look and, I mean, let's stay on the nonprofit philanthropy charity side for a bit. We look at boards, and everybody says, oh, we need diverse boards, we need diverse boards. And it's really tough in Chester County to get some color diversity, but age diversity would seem to be a little bit more straightforward, because you can see people have different ages and you can visually start to recruit from different ages. Do I dare ask for folks here, how many of you, can you look at your own boards of directors and you feel like it's got some age diversity on it and you're really, really happy with that? Yeah? Okay. How did you make it work? How does it happen? How do you get diverse age groups on your, well, you can't answer.
We made a concerted effort.
Okay.
We made a concerted effort to go for some young people so we could get some vibrant ideas for the future.
I do think it's important,
Yeah.
though, when you're considering diversity, is that you're not just trying to find, you know, one of every Skittle color in the bowl. It's actually to include ideas from those diverse interests. And you don't have to do every single idea that comes along, certainly. But I think that getting different perspectives and actually having a meaningful contribution is a lot more important. So, inclusion is more relevant than diversity, I think, when it comes to adapting to modern times and making boards dynamic.
Can I keep talking about that? Can I add to it, Scott?
I would agree, absolutely. The more ideas and thought processes that you can get rolling into a common conversation, it's just going to benefit everybody.
It's also the talents that they bring to the table and their exposure. I mean, how many times you hear an older person say, well, I just don't understand the computer. I'm still not savvy, not there. Where it's second nature to someone young. And as long as everybody's coming to the table where they don't feel threatened, the ones that are going out, they don't feel threatened, that it becomes a collaborative effort, then everybody can provide their strengths to it and then advance the whole process together.
And I think there is a willingness from, we're talking about, age being a key factor here. I remember seeing, donations from young people that have huge student loan debts to nonprofit charities. And it blows my mind, like, why are you donating to charity when you have these huge student loan debts and you can barely make your rent and all that? And the donations might be tiny. They might be like a $5 donation or a $10 donation that they're making online. And so that's, imagine, a challenge for a lot of boards of how are we going to process and intake those payments, and are they really worth it to chase that money and all that? But they're doing it because they want to be included. They're fully aware as a millennial donor, I think, that their $10 or their $5 is not going to make a world of difference, but they want to be part of a community, and maybe they're not going to invest their time, but they're going to invest that $10. And so I think one of the challenges is, how do you invest their talents and their time? How do you extract that from them, and not just the $5 or $10 donation?
Well, I think the $5 and $10 donation is a great entree. I mean, I think that's something they feel that they can do. And I think the millennials as a whole understand the value of a collectively contributing. They realize very quickly that it's not just $5, it's $5 plus 5 and 5. And they view themselves as a mass more than, and looking for that, the other people to be part of what they're doing, for their movement, what they're interested in, and to be, therefore they can. And I guess our goal would be, or hope, is those $5 donations become 10, become 100, become sustaining members or supporters of a cause. Yeah. So we can't not include them, and I think it's really incumbent that they feel that there is a place for them, even at the $5 level, and they're accepted, and that is sought after, not just searching for the large donations.
Part of me wonders if that's a means for younger people to feel included, like they're part of a larger whole, as opposed to getting together with people, because there's so much sort of staying online, looking at your phone or your computer. But if you can be part of a larger whole by doing a $5 or $10 donation, maybe that's easier than showing up to a meeting and we're with a bunch of people you don't know and trying to get your ideas across a table or something like that.
I could see that, but at the same time, having been involved with the Community Foundation and worked with some of the younger volunteers volunteers and committee members and whatnot, they like to get together. At least the ones
There's
that are
usually
totally
beer.
committed. I mean, they really enjoy it. They
Yeah.
enjoy the camaraderie, and they enjoy the common goals and seeing the fruits of their efforts. And it's it's very rewarding. So it's it goes well beyond that $5 or $10, and then there's the spin-off advantages of I was with this great group last night, and the next day having a conversation with somebody that may not be aware of it. So there's a big trickle down there.
All right, so a couple of things in You Are the Future of Philanthropy is things are happening a lot quicker, so we have to kind of gear up for a faster pace of involvement and change. Also, small gifts, especially small gifts that start to recur, that probably can be donated online with a credit card, to be able to be set up to accept that, because philanthropy starts someplace, and that $5 or $10 gift probably is coming every other month on a credit card at this point, or through Facebook or something.
You'd be surprised how many don't have checkbooks.
Is Sweden or some country just said no more checks? I mean, there was, right, Bert? There's one of them, yeah. And I thought, oh my gosh, I still write checks, but some countries don't anymore. So online giving, electronic giving. Kathy, you had something else to add?
I think young people in general have to be taught to give. If you figure like 30, 40, 50 years ago, it's more likely that somebody grew up in an area where their parents were or their grandparents were, there was family around, there was, volunteer for the fire company or whatever it was, but there was a sense that this was your community and you were responsible for holding it safe and creating what you wanted in your world. And now, it's more common that, your family's in Arizona, your family's here, you moved around a couple of times. So there's not that natural sense of ownership necessarily in the place where you live. So you called me a boundary expander, and it's because I think people want to participate in things, but they don't necessarily know how. So I considered myself fortunate that I run into all of these people in nonprofits, and I work with a wide variety of age groups. So that if I tag somebody that I think's interested in the community, it's perfect to make that connection. In fact, I did it after the gym class this morning. I talked this young lady into joining the Preservation Awards Committee, and hopefully she'll eventually be a board member for the Downtown Foundation.
Wait, young lady joined the Preservation Awards, like the old stuff you're trying to say?
The old stuff. She
Really?
said something about it. I'm like, hey, I'll give you a ride home. Let's talk.
Okay, so you picked her up at the gym, and now you've got a volunteer.
Yes.
Interesting. All right. Good.
Well, I think that's where social media comes in too. That what can I do, and that there's when it's in front of them in a non-threatening situation, they can flick right by it if they don't want it, but they can sit and read it without feeling that they're going to be attacked tomorrow. So I think there may be some that learning aspect can come through the social media.
All right, so be able to learn a bit in private.
And then the follow through would be how they can get involved, whether it's donation, whether it's an activity, and I think that is a place. I mean, like you said, I'm in on the internet, in the evening like this with my cell phone in front of me and flipping through things. So it's a way that you can get into them and in front of them more. And that is where they're spending their time. All
right.
And
So
then once they do get involved in things, then I think they realize the benefit of that social interaction. Those intangibles, it's not only doing the good, but it's what it's doing for them, and that just wants them to do more and contribute more and to be a part of it more.
So the challenges for nonprofits are to make sure to get enough word out on social media, which just isn't one thing by any means.
No.
And do people still read print media? Yeah, some do.
Some do.
And there's radio and there's something called television sometimes. So how do you get the word out on all the different venues? So there's a lot of stuff to throw out there.
And I think that one of the challenges has to be for the nonprofits is that it's not just the millennials they're going after. They have to maintain the continuum. So you are going to have maybe some of your older donors that are still reading a newspaper and a magazine and are watching TV, and that's going to be the way that you have to connect with them, and that it's not a one-size-fits-all, which I think it used to be easier when all you had was television and newspaper as your primary, and flyers in the mail.
When I started, I actually could sit at a standard typewriter and type a press release and put a stamp on it and mail it out, and it would get in the newspaper, and then everybody would know.
Don't date
Can I
yourself.
do that now? No. So you have to keep up with the pacing of change. Yeah,
But there are still some people that need that.
There
that
are.
don't have an email, that don't have,
Right.
other avenues. I mean, you send out an email blast, and you're reaching thousands and thousands of people, but there's also a segment that you may not be reaching. I think that's got to be a challenge for the foundations or for the charities, is how do you reach all of them?
Right.
And
So
the new donors in all of the different age spectrums.
multiple
or,
communication channels, so it added a whole level of diversification and work. And all right, this is a question for the estate planner, the attorney, the accountant. I guess, do people make planned gifts because of social media? I mean, we're talking large estate gifts. What's the best vehicles to communicate with folks that way?
My experience has been more of them, they either have their charitable intent, they have an idea of where they want to go, where they want to do with their funds. Whether it's very specific or whether it's very broad. Thinking of a younger client of mine, again, she's in a position, she's in a startup company that's going, through the roof, and there's a lot of, she's like a 10% owner of a company, and the other two hold the other 90%. And there is a lot of, and I don't want to say pressure, but encouragement that she is to do good with that. She is to do social good with this found wealth. And that was the first time that I really found, it was really ingrained within the company that this is what they were supposed to, what she was supposed to do. And then she followed suit, and she wanted to. So there's also that internal desire. But it's there. But it's not, at that level, it's the larger gifts are not, I think, through social media.
So
I think
so it's still the individual
it's still the
conversations,
individual organization and
the volunteering and getting involved over time.
hearing
It's making
about
sure
things.
there's enough vehicles for communication and methods of that overall. Yeah. So again, it's having to do a lot. Anybody want to add to that in the conversation? Ideas it's sparking? Joey, I see you thinking. Bert, what you got?
I'd like to go back to the food cupboard fire. It's just one example of the overwhelming response you tend to get from people when there is a crisis. How do we make that happen without setting the building on fire?
No.
Right. If you set the building on fire every day, you have compassion fatigue set in, and you can't set the building on fire every day. So how do we make it compelling but not fired? Yeah, I don't have that answer, Bert. But Tony does.
I think that's what Katherine Fulton's talking about. That's the future of philanthropy. And that's, that food cover fire, that touches people's heart. The same thing happened with the Barclay in Westchester. And it touches people's heart. So what Katherine's talking about is touching people's heart in an expansive way, in the ways that Eric's talking about. And by the way, I have to say one more thing about our board. We decided on inclusion, and I should have said that in my answer, because we didn't just choose this young man to come on our board. We looked out for more than one. We looked out for 4, so we'd have inclusion instead of just a skittle.
Or token.
Yeah, no disrespect was intended on that answer, that's for
now
sure.
I have to show you a Skittle picture I have. It's really good.
But I think it's funny though how I think we're framing things as what certain interests might want and how do we appeal to certain interests. But I think that you're absolutely right. To avoid the fire, it's more about how do we create the experience and make people feel included and involved in what's happening in their community. And it's not necessarily tied to specific ages, because I think if people in the room do know what Snap is, or used to be called Snapchat, And you can do filters within Snapchat, right? So like if you take a picture of yourself in Snapchat, you can have it display, you know, something superimposed over top of you, like Halloween. There might be a Halloween mask or whatnot. I was at a birthday party a few weeks ago. It was a birthday party for someone in her 60s. And her favorite birthday present she received at that birthday party was somebody purchased a Snapchat filter for use that weekend so that everybody could take selfies of themselves and post them on Snap, and it would have like filters for Nancy's birthday. And people loved it, and they were all part of like Nancy's birthday, and there were all sorts of comments and questions, and a lot more people knew about Nancy's birthday that weekend than were at that party. So how do you make people more aware of what's happening locally, more aware of what the needs are?
How do you keep resilient and ever learning?
I think you got to
Ms.
keep
Wilczek?
keep your message clear to who's supposed to be receiving it, and you got to be careful you don't overdo it. Like how many mornings do you come into your email box and it's like another one from this, like twice a day? I don't, you know, it's just too much. So by getting your story across in meaningful intervals, and if it means something, then it's much easier for somebody to click and give something. I remember a particular series of emails I got after the hurricanes in Texas and Florida wanting me to donate money for new coats for kids, and I thought those kids never had coats.
Florida, they don't need coats. Well, and actually, we learned a lot from Covenant House in the early 2000s, because I remember Covenant House would put out these incredible 4-page pity letters that would just break your heart, and they just put out tons and tons and tons of them. And compassion fatigue was sort of the term that started after a while, because it was just too much. And then it went back to the standard principle that, you know, you want to draw people in with a compelling, heartfelt story, but then appeal to the logical side of what's going on and how their gift can make a difference, and then end with something, again, feeling kind of warm. So it can't just all be fire, fire, compassion, compassion. And actually, that kind of segues into another trend that Katherine Fulton was talking about, is social investment. I mean, that's the whole opposite of really just giving to the fire. Social entrepreneurship, the whole idea that there are businesses that make a profit and then donate the portion of it to charity. The idea that there's social venture funds that people get together and decide how to make investments in their community. The idea that you just don't give because it makes you feel good, but you give because you want to have somebody help assess the impact of your gift. That's a whole different way of giving, a much more analytical way of giving. And a lot of times it actually started with reinventing government, because we wanted to have some impact from our tax dollars. And then it filtered over to corporations trying to have much more of the total quality control and a lot of the statistics and assessment, and then it filtered over to the nonprofit sector. So if government has to reinvent itself and for-profit has to make sure and have a good bottom line, well, nonprofit's got to measure up too. So there's this whole trend through the 90s and the 2000s of impact of your dollar, your charitable dollar. And that's not the same as giving to fires and things like that. Do you see, I mean, how do you see that play out?
That's been coming more and more into the discussions in some of the charitable foundations and things like that, because some of them they don't want to eat into their corpus with grants, additional grants, but they feel that through their investments, whether it's to have an equity interest in a small business or in a business that aligns with their goals of their charity, that they want to do that. It's an alternate way for them, part of their, and usually it's just a portion of their investment portfolio.
It's called PRIs, program-related investments. Where you take the money that, if you're in a foundation, you would take the money that might just go into stocks and bonds, and you make sure it goes into a program-related thing.
Either a small or either the right stocks and bonds, so at least you are supporting your charitable goals through your investment. And that has been coming more and more into the discussion. And then it gets more that it's smaller portions. They're still sort of dabbling their feet, their toes in the water with that.
Well, I think we saw it with foundations then starting it, and then also United Way, a whole trend in the 90s really started with assessing impact. I mean, Meg and Beth, who else you all know, who gets United Way money? Who's got to really go to the evaluation of impact coursework, right? And you've been there, right? So assessing impact. You want to talk a little bit about how that's affected what you've seen in the nonprofit sector?
I've seen the difficulties that nonprofits have encountered in trying to create evidence-based programming and showing the outcomes. The United Way and other institutions have been very helpful in helping to educate on the model for SMART goals and everything that has helped a lot of the nonprofits to improve their own programs in the process.
I think it's a tough one. I mean, my academic background has a lot of evaluation in it, and when it gets right down to it, it's a lot easier to count widgets or Skittles. It's a lot harder to say, okay, the interventions that your social service organization have made have then helped this child or this family not to be whatever. And I bet, Bert, you probably see the same thing with Family Promise. How can you see, or the Decade to Doorways initiative, how can you tell which things are really going to have an impact to make a difference on some of the softer side of things? Well, a lot of these problems are really mushy social problems. Poverty, if we could you don't solve poverty just with money. Now, wow, money's not going to solve just poverty issues. Who knew? So yeah, the whole idea of evidence-based assessment has been a huge trend over the last 20 years in philanthropy, but it's really expensive to do it, and the comparables are huge over time. But you want to talk a little bit more about that?
I was just going to say that I was part of United Way down in Delaware when they went through this. I agree with this, but I also think that it's something that the not-for-profit world has to deal with and take to a higher level, because not only are corporations or foundations wanting this information, our next generation of individual donors want this. They're not giving to not-for-profits because it's the right thing to do. They're giving to not-for-profits because they want to make a difference in the world. But they have to see that difference, or they're going to go to somewhere else. So this is a real issue that the not-for-profit world has to deal with. It's tough to measure yourself in an impactful way that's going to make a difference for someone who doesn't know you as well, but wants to support the work that you're doing. So it's a real discussion that I think needs to continue and maybe even be facilitated at a higher level. I don't know whether it's United Way or you guys. It's a conversation that's got to continue.
Yeah. And it costs a lot of money to evaluate some of these learning problems well. And it's got to be an openness to best practices and research overall, and that's not inexpensive, so it's a balance point. Do you want to add anything? Anybody who's really done more of the work in this area? Yeah, what else? Here, let me hear you.
Yes, thank you. I would just say that to one of the points in the TED Talk, for people who want to give to create impact, they need to realize that creating impact takes time. So they need to think long.
Maybe that was my thing about time and quick. Yeah.
Right. That I think it's great to give for the long-term impact, but recognizing that it takes an extended commitment to an organization that's willing to make these measurements in order to see any change.
I think the way you balance that and make that work is to collect data that back up milestones, so you can see mileposts along the way to that big goal. Because I think if there's a 10-year goal, a lot of people can understand that. But if you're thinking about, do you want to donate here or not? Is it going somewhere or not? If you can demonstrate these are the mileposts and we're hitting them, that's good. I mean, the United Way, you see that big thermometer out every year of how is that mercury rising, and we're getting closer to our goal as the campaign goes on. I think that's helpful and makes people want to participate in that.
And people want to know that it's going to be a sustainable change as well.
Well, Well, I think that's why you get such a tremendous response to the fire or to the food cupboard. You know,
Tangible.
because it's tangible. They know they see an immediate gratification. Not that that is what we want, not that that's sustainable, but I think that's where there's a big difference between the sustaining
hit on
gifts, the larger gifts, the sustaining gifts, and the immediate response to a catastrophe.
And it's easier to give a kid a coat, and nothing against Operation Warm, but it's easy to give a coat. But you have to figure out why they were cold in the first place and why they couldn't afford their own coat. That's really hard.
Yeah.
Interesting. What else? What else? Other changes and trends you've seen over time from your vantage point? We talked about aggregating. What else, Daphne?
Well, I was just going to say, you know, from the estate planning perspective, you know, the changes in the federal exemption. There used to be a lot more tax, like I was saying to someone earlier, taxes never made someone charitable, but a charitable person may make larger donations or commitments because of a tax advantage that they may have. And you know, with the federal exemption, that tax advantage has been removed. I'm finding the larger donors, the more charitable people with more charitable intent, taxes don't come into play. They still want to do that. They're still looking to give a portion of their estate to charitable purposes, irregardless of that tax impetus. So it's just, there's a small group, I think, that made a difference, and maybe it's more in magnitude. But
Ms. CPA, anything you would like to add to that? What have you seen so
You
far?
you got the long-term estate end, I got the year-to-year stuff. So everybody was so concerned about charitable giving disappearing because of the change in the itemized deductions and the limits, that people wouldn't have a tax value to their contributions. You are so correct that that has nothing to do with somebody's decision to give. Yeah. The givers continued to give. We had lots of conversations about ways to change up that giving by lumping contributions into particular years. Took lots of questions about starting donor advised funds so that like a pop of money could be set aside and then used. But they never stopped giving. Probably one of my most meaningful 1040s I ever did in the way of charity. It was a little old lady. She was a Quaker, and it was years and years ago, and I still remember that she must have given she had nothing. Like, she was living on her Social Security, if that. And every year there would be like a 2-page list of these contributions of $5, $10. She wrote them all down, and she kept track of them. She couldn't even itemize. But that was amazing to me. I'm like, are you eating cat food? And yet still, this little bit that you gave was such a huge proportion of what you had for yourself.
Yeah.
And then you do a tax return where a guy made $6 million and he gave away $50.
right, yeah.
Generosity does not have to do with income level.
You know, there are times I'll mention, mentioning charitable, you know, donations. Do you have any charitable do you have any charities that you support on a regular basis? Trying to start a conversation about charitable giving in it. And some people, it's like, nope. Bang, nothing, and then other people that you can bring it out and that you find out that they have an interest in.
Could you give a rough number? Like, if you had 10 conversations with somebody, you know, 10 different clients to do estate planning with, what proportion of those, when you say charity, actually go,
Not one.
oh, what, how many out of 10?
There's clients out there that I can't even get them what I call my apocalypse clause. So it's like everybody in your family that you can name easily, like first they know what month they're born in. So it's your children, your grandchildren, nieces and nephews, you know, that kind of an immediate family. And they still, when you say, well, why don't, you know, do you have a charity? We could put the charity in as you know, if your whole family, you know, was gone. And I can't even get some people to say yes to that point.
Okay, so out of 10 people, give me a number. I'm pushing for you.
You're pushing
How many
for
out of 10 will actually say, oh yeah, I would like to include charity in my estate plans?
One?
1 out of
That-
10?
Yeah.
Maybe.
1 out of
Maybe.
10, 2 out of
Maybe.
10. I mean,
Unless they
tone?
come in, you know.
Yeah.
You know, then you have the opposite
Wendy,
extreme,
there
and
you
there's
are.
like, I want to set
Didn't see
away,
you there.
set aside a certain percentage. Bam,
Okay.
no question.
All
My
right.
kids can wait.
All
I
right.
want to make this charitable. I want to make sure that charities are taken. So I'm seeing them. They're either upfront about it, they want it, or you almost
All
can't
right.
sway them.
All right, I'm going to compare notes. Winnie Sebastian's here, estate planning, Oxford. How many how many clients? 1 out of 10, Winnie? Maybe 2?
Yeah.
All right. Tony Morris, Esquire, estate planning, 1 or 2 out of 10? Yep. Okay. If that. All right.
Some years that one's very.
All right, Collis has got something. All right, go for it, Collis.
On average, when you raise it, whatever, figure, that's fine. If one can't, that's. So anyway, back at the ranch. Next question then is, when is the optimal time to pose the question? Because typically, if people are in their 70s and 80s, their estate plans are pretty fixed. You know, at 30, they're still worried about the kids. You know, it's the 45, 50, 60, if that's the point to pop the question for a contingent beneficiary to say,
Right.
I called it the nuclear war clause. You know, everybody's dead, give to charity, right? Any thoughts on age, timing of when to ask the question?
That's a really good point. So if we were all just saying 2 out of 10, 1 out of 10, depends upon what diversity of age group came in during that period of time that you're talking about. I mean, you might get 2 big givers in the period of 2 months. But so your point's well taken, and the answer is when they're older and they have more money.
Yeah.
I think.
Because then they know what, then they have an idea where their children are, are their children, financially comfortable. They know, they have a better feeling of what their wealth is, what they can afford to give away, to maintain some of their other goals. When the kids are young, it's really a hard sell, unless you're going to a tertiary beneficiary on an IRA.
All right. Beth
But forms
Harpervillia.
don't permit it. But forms don't encourage that.
Forms don't encourage that?
No.
No, it's
No.
conversations.
But no, what I'm saying, even when one wants to do it, right? The forms, when you get
the
a
estate
Vanguard
planning form?
beneficiary
Oh,
form,
yeah.
they're probably the best because they do have a check the box for charities. But it's hard to get some of these. You have to go off form, you have to be creative. And then the client goes, well, why do I have to do that? Maybe this isn't what I should do because this isn't what everybody else is doing.
because it's not the form.
It's not the form.
Yeah.
And now the computer forms are doing the same thing. They don't give you the options and you have to push to go off.
So we have advocacy work
So
to
you
do
have
there.
advocacy work to do, yeah.
Interesting. I've been trying to do it with estate planning firms to make sure that the question about charities comes up very closer to the top. Because then there's one where it comes right next to, have you already pre-purchased your
Burial.
burial?
Yeah. I will
Burial
admit
plans and then
mine,
charity. I'm
after we
like,
talked 2
please.
weeks ago, I've changed the order on my
Oh,
form.
goody.
So-
Beth, I know you're eager to add something about when people make decisions about planned gifts. What do you see from your role at the Community Foundation as Executive Vice President of Philanthropy?
So I wanted to comment in 2 areas. So one is, I think when Kathy was addressing the way that people give is changing, that is true, but I think it's incumbent upon the nonprofit to recognize that they need to attract those gifts. So for instance, if Kathy's saying people are bundling and they're putting money into a donor advised fund, it becomes the nonprofit's responsibility rather than just asking for a gift of cash or stock to say, consider giving us a gift from your donor advised fund. The other thing we see along those lines is the gift for the 70, the type of giving is changing. So for the 70 and a half, who has an IRA where they don't need their required minimum distribution, or they didn't need all of their required minimum distribution, for the charity to say, you know what, here's another way you can give to us. So that was coming through my mind on the what I'll call the annual giving perspective. On the estate planning question, I think we are seeing people who are in their, I would say 55 to 70 range are really kind of thinking about what's my next step? How do I establish a testamentary gift? What type of asset makes sense? What's the most tax efficient asset? So in many cases it is the IRA asset for that. And so our experience has been that we sign a lot of fund agreements on the testamentary side when somebody is at the point where they know, to Stephanie, your point, they know how their children are doing, or they don't have heirs, quite frankly. Or
That's the best one. They're the easiest to convince
those are,
charities.
and we see a lot of this, but we also see a lot of donors who have children but feel that their children are secure. But it's generally when their children are older, I'll say, and that.
And it goes the other way. They know what their kids are and they don't want to give it to them. I have
How
a
their
couple.
kids act?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're not pleased with what's going on, and then there's like, well, they're not entitled. I had one who just I just sent out a draft today. She just changed it. 50% is going to charity. Why? Because she's mad at her daughter, to be honest with you. No, you know.
Oops.
The daughter hasn't seen her, and you know she sets up an irrevocable trust, puts money in currently for the daughter. Daughter's got a nice nest egg there. Daughter decides she doesn't need her mom anymore. It's irrevocable. So mom said, okay, well, I'll show you. Instead of the rest of the money that I have here, you know, you're only getting half of it in trusts coming out to charities, and that's.
So it's an irrevocable trust, so the kid is being a spoiled brat now?
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's
No more
sizable.
irrevocable
I mean,
trust.
it's a sizable trust. You know.
What else, Beth? You look confused.
No.
What I want to say, some of the hardest cases that we deal with from a donor perspective on the testamentary side is when they feel that when they are no longer with us, that they can use charity to bring their families together. Those are some of the hardest family situations that I have to deal with and the foundation deals with in general. So one of the things we'd like to encourage that even if it's a small amount, if you're thinking of a testamentary gift, to start today and get the family involved today to set their visions and values so they know what you're thinking while you're alive, rather than just making it a pure testamentary. So, and we've had, I think, good success in doing that, but yeah, it's hard to use charity to bring people together.
It doesn't.
People expect charity to do a lot. They really do. Impact, bring your family together, all that stuff. Can I just kind of switch the focus a little bit? I would love to hear your story about how you got involved. Kathy, you sort of touched on it a little bit. Eric, what did you see over time? You say people need to be taught, but there's probably more like it was around you environmentally. How did you get involved in the charitable sector? What did you see when you were growing up? At what age? That sort of stuff. Anybody?
I'll answer that question a little bit just to tie it in a little with what we were just talking about. I think we spent a lot of time talking about the data of, you know, how efficient is the charity? How do we measure that? How do we measure progress on certain goals? And we talked about data of the actual, you know, art of giving through, you know, and tax returns and that sort of thing. But one piece of data we didn't talk about that I found very important personally was what's the data of the people in need? What's the data of the constituents? What's really going on? And so, you know, my background, I have a degree in computer science, and so I'm all about the data. I live for data. And for me, one of the things that surprised me locally, because I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio, which was a very tough area relative to here. High unemployment, you know, low levels of education, high levels of crime. And, you know, coming here to Chester County, it was like, whoa, this is completely different. I'm still trying to make sense of it some days of my life here. But, you know, years ago, I got involved with the homeless point in time count. And, you know, and that's where I actually saw data on how many homeless people there are here in Chester County. And it blew me away because you'd never guess that, you know, driving by. And when you're doing the point in time count, you actually are going through, you know, homeless camps in the area and literally taking a census of how many individuals are homeless here in Chester County. When you see that with your own eyes, you know, it certainly changes you a little bit. So I think that more data on what the actual need is really helps to motivate people and get people more involved. And that certainly worked for me. And one of the things that strikes me lately when it comes to data is published by the United Way, their ALICE score, their ALICE analysis. And that's talking about, okay, not just a certain poverty level here in the county, but okay, what does it take to actually make a certain sustainable wage? How far away are you from, you know, maybe if you had a small car repair issue, would that throw you down into the realm of poverty where you can't escape and you need help from all the charities in the area? You know, what if you could get people above that ALICE level? Because, you know, here in Chester County, we're, yeah, sure, way above the poverty level compared to the rest of the state, but the ALICE level, yeah, we're above that, the rest of the state too, but by not nearly as large of a margin.
Point. Excellent.
That's what motivates me to answer your question.
I like it.
Data.
I like it. Yeah. Seeing is feeling. Go ahead.
I'll take it. I think my family wasn't wealthy, So there weren't any big foundations or anything, but the concept of giving back to the community, the concept of donating what you had to the organizations that were important to you, that you knew of, was always there. I can't remember, I remember big family gatherings where, after, usually around 1 o'clock, after everybody had been drinking, somebody says, oh, we need to remember, and some of them were back in Greece, but this old age home in the hometown that, that our family is from, or, that we need to pass a hat, we need to gather money and send and support. So I think that it started in the home. I was also a Girl Scout. And Girl Scouting was a wonderful organization that talked about community service and serving other people and getting it out. My faith, my religion, my church, doing for others. And I think on a whole, I think our society is lacking some of that, those continual, that ingrained, that innate importance of giving. And I'm not sure how we address that.
I hear it coming different ways, though, too, because what you're talking about is family, getting together to eat and drink and celebrate those occasions, and also service organizations, which there's a ton of them in high schools and colleges these days, more than when I was a kid. And also you're talking about faith, organized religion,
Just as a vehicle.
As a vehicle.
And as a basis for.
But right next to you, you've got the king of data, who needs to know the numbers and then go see and feel it tangibly. So different stories, different motivations, different things that are compelling.
But I like the
people.
data.
Oh yeah.
Because I want the data to support that what I'm doing is the best use, the best of my time. I think
it's so important.
Accountability.
Scott, tell your story if you could.
Well, I think we're social creatures, and we learn by example. I grew up in a situation where my grandfather and my parents gave back to the community and were very active. And I think that just sort of cycled down to me. Karen, you and I were talking about, I've got 2 sons who are now 20 and 23. That'll blow your mind.
You do not.
I do. And I'm so proud to see what they do by giving back with their philanthropic efforts. But I think perhaps what really got them involved, Karen, was when you suggested that I bring them to Sweet Charity very early on.
Munchkins.
They were little kids, and they really enjoyed themselves, and obviously ate too many sugary treats. But
pounds for 3 days.
They got it.
Yeah.
They got it. They understood what everybody was doing there to a certain degree.
Sure.
But for me, that's something that I was always fascinated by. Maybe it was just they were on a sugar high, and so that they were that much more into it.
Daddy helped organize this event. Now Daddy's on this board.
And I've got a picture on my refrigerator at home that I look at every single day, and it reminds me of, as my father had instilled in me. Hopefully I've done just a little part to start them on their way.
Nice. Very good. Thank you. Sweet. All right, Kathy, what's your story?
All right. I grew up in Camelot. I grew up in a neighborhood where everybody did everything. My father was on Civic Association, the firehouse, you name it, he participated in it. There was always people at the house. And I saw how that enriched not only the community, which is the ultimate beneficiary, but how much better it made my parents' lives. So they weren't wealthy. There were not lots of great checks written anywhere. Sometimes food was a little sketchy. Not literally, but just, spaghetti too many nights in a row.
A lot of sauerkraut and spaghetti.
but there was always people at the house. There was always an activity. It didn't matter if it was Christmas in the fire trucks or the 4th of July parade that the Civic Association put on. It was just a constant flow of different people in and out of the house participating in the community. And it was a really unique way to grow up, and I can't be thankful enough for it.
And how do you pass that on? just do it naturally?
I pick
or
up
is
women
it-
in the gym and ask them to join the community.
All right.
That's what I've always done.
Pick up folks. So as we look to the future in Chester County of philanthropy, and we look, we're the Chester County Community Foundation. We're trying to paint a vision. Katherine Fulton had that blank frame. What do you want your picture to be? What kinds of things do you think will help overall in Chester County to paint the picture you want? I mean, there's a part of me, Eric, that thinks, okay, we want more data about what's really going on in Chester County. And then, do we do more things with families to help grow philanthropy? How do we paint that picture of what we want philanthropy in Chester County to look like 25 years from now? And what's our part? It's a hard question.
Very difficult question.
It is.
The crystal ball doesn't always work, but obviously I think it comes down to education. Educating the public at large as far as what the needs are, what's the true human need. I think the tough part is prioritizing those needs because everybody's going to have a different opinion. So what's the most efficient way to attack these problems or approach these problems, but do it equitably? That's the tough question.
All right. What else? Other ideas, other thoughts?
I think it should look like a mirror. I think everybody should look at that picture, see themselves, and say, there's something that I can do. Nobody can do everything. Nobody wants to do everything. Nobody should do everything. But anybody who looks at that should be able to see some way that they can participate in the community, either financially or time-wise, or sharing their knowledge with somebody who may be able to give more.
So if we all share our time, talent, treasure, conversations, Jim
Get
Rice
there.
somehow, because if we're all at the aggregate level, it will all come together with some great force. Okay. Yeah. What else? When you paint that picture looking ahead, what do you see? What makes it the mirror? What's in that frame for Chester County? Anything?
I think participation is a key aspect of both education as well as just bringing it all together and sharing that, with whether it's future generations or other people that haven't had that exposure previously. Having that level of participation, encouraging people to just come out and do one small thing, join a committee, join a volunteer task force one day, whatever it might be, increase that donation from $5 to 10 times next time, or $10 next time, make it a recurring donation, something like that. The more people get involved and they don't have to just jump right in with a big donation, a small incremental donation of service or donation of money, really helps and goes a long way. Once they're involved, once they're participating, I think then it becomes easy.
So dipping in the toe and then kind of getting a little bit warmer, starting small and growing. Yeah.
And something maybe that it's more coordinated, that there's a place, a resource, and maybe that's the role of the community foundation. There's a place that you go to find what are the needs, where can I go, how can I support, make it easy. I mean, if it's too hard to find something that you want to do, then you end up not doing it. So I know when we spoke the other day, that was one of the things I was really intrigued by, that you become a resource.
So how to formalize it and make it easier to access for everybody.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That where do I go? Instead of having to go to each and to figure out what everybody's needs are here, I'd have to, check out, 40 websites,
Right.
assuming it's on there, as opposed to maybe something more centralized.
And I think a lot of times people just don't know that
They don't
there are
know.
resources
Yeah.
available. So Chester County has a wealth of resources available, but doing something as helping them get to the place where they need to be, or explaining something to them, nudging them along a little bit for something small, that goes a long way, because so many people think it's not accessible.
Fascinating.
I know I raised my hand, but I gotta.
No, Tony, we're doing strategic planning here. We're good.
Honestly, it seems to me to pick up on Katherine Fulton's point, and the point you made about how everybody feels after something happens, and then your youth and your ideas. I think I see you as chairman of our board 10 years from now, and you can look in that mirror. No, I'm serious, because what you're going to have to do is take the emotion. Everybody doesn't grow up the way you did. You lived in Camelot. I had parents that really cared about giving too, but everybody didn't. And what Katherine's talking about is getting everybody out there and to aggregate it. And I see that with people with young minds who know how to communicate it to lots of people, getting them out there. And I keep calling it the nexus, but you take the emotion that comes after the fire, and you, somehow or other you get that, and you get all that social media going, and then we lawyers will be busy.
All right, so let's get busy with the business of philanthropy, all right? Very good. Guess what, folks? We said 6:30, and it is 6:26. So congratulations. You are the future of philanthropy, past, present, and future. I would like to thank you for making a real interesting TED Talk. Y'all videotaped us, didn't you? All right, so we've got 2 more TED Talks, the same one. And what we found last time was the 3 sites had different conversations. Fascinating. So we'll do the whole TED Talk online, plus also you'll do another highlight of the TED Talks, right? All right, so you will see yourself, all right? So thank you very much for joining us at Longwood Gardens this evening, and thank you very much for being the past, present, and future of philanthropy. Eat, drink, and be merry before you run out the door, all right? Thank you. Thank you.